Hey everybody, Josh here for Whiskey Wednesday for Argonaut Wine and Liquor. Today I am joined by a very special guest, Mr. Owen Martin, Master Distiller of Angel's Envy Distilling. We're super excited to have you here. Before we jump into what we got a very full lineup today. Just wanted to let everybody know today is the final day of Argonaut's 60th anniversary sale. So we have a ton going on. Basically the entire store is on sale. Everything you see here is on sale. All spirits 700 mLs and up are 15% off. All wine is 20% off, and all 12 packs of beer are $2 off. There are prizes. We've got entry boxes we're giving away 5 $100 gift cards to Argonaut, and just all kinds of cool stuff going on. So definitely a great day to come on down, or since the weather's not great, shop online or by phone, or on our app. You still get the sale prices as well. So let's dive right in. We got a ton to go over today, Owen. You want to tell us a little bit about kind of your story and Angel's Envy and how those two collide?
Sure. Well, we can start with Angel's Envy.
Yep.
So I think you said you're on your 60th anniversary. Angel's Envy just hit 15. So
congratulations.
I think one of the strengths of the brand is that, recognizable bottle, one of the first downtown urban distilleries. Our advocacy program's done a lot of lifting for us. So people think we've been around longer than we have, but just hit 15. So, some of these are sort of my mark on that, having only hit 3 with the company as well. But as I'm sure most of the listeners know, most of the viewers know, we were founded on cask finishing, right? Like pretty much the cask finished bourbon company. So that's most of what you have in front of you today.
Yeah, so I mean, everybody's familiar with the, kind of the standard, the flagship. We'll come back to this one in a minute. But what we've got in the glass right now is Triple Oak, which is a newer project from you guys. Can you tell us a little bit about this one?
Sure. So cool one for me because, as I said, 15 years in, we were founded on a port finished bourbon and a rum finished rye, and that really had been our daily drivers for our whole history. About a year into the company, I got tasked with adding a third day in, day out SKU, and that's what became Triple Oak. But for us, my background's more in Scotch whiskey. That's how I got in the industry, is getting my master's degree there, living there for a couple of years. Cask finishing is just a tool that I was taught of how to make whiskey. So, we had done wine finishing, right? We had done spirits finishing, both of which I would consider more of kind of the Scotch or European conception of what a finished whiskey is. I know it's a little bit different nowadays, where I think finishing's really caught on across all the brands. But if I look more traditionally of what a finished American whiskey would be, so by law we got to age in new oak, so people then put it in a second new oak barrel, right? So your toasted barrel finishes, your double oaks, and we'd never really done that. So when I got tasked with adding a new day in day out release, the only guidelines were that it would need to be a bourbon, and after that it was kind of a complete white space to see what we wanted to do. Cool. And that double oaking idea kind of was resonating in my head as the opportunity. Because my job, no matter what whiskey we're working on, is always to make the best possible whiskey, put the best possible whiskey in the bottle. But with this one, I mean, how boring would have been if I came up with a second wine finished bourbon, and really that wouldn't serve the purpose. So even though Triple Oak, obviously the goal was to make the best whiskey we could, the second goal was to make it as different as possible from our flagship, right? And so the fun thing about tasting these, if you ever get the opportunity to do side by side, is that for the first 5 years, they're the exact same whiskey. It's the same exact base bourbon. And for us, most of what we still do day to day is educate on what finishing is, what flavors it's bringing to the fold, and to have those available next to each other, I think is hugely valuable for us, because we can show, look, our base bourbon has a degree of fruitiness to it from the fermentation, from the aging. The wine barrels are meant to accentuate that. Triple Oak, obviously, as you might imagine, bourbon being a fairly oak-forward spirit in the whiskey realm, and having a degree of spice to it, Triple Oak is just meant to pull it more in that direction and accentuate the complexity and depth of the oak varieties. So for me, super fun project to have been involved with. It's the biggest project I've worked on my whole career. So this next bottling run it'll happen a couple months from now, will take us past the 1 million bottle mark.
Congratulations.
And so a year and a half of existence of that release, and we're about to hit a million bottles.
That's it. I mean, for those of you guys who aren't familiar, that is a huge number. And this is a fantastic bottle. I mean, I was just kind of nosing it as we were talking. Some of the notes I remember from the flagship, it's kind of more of like the dates, dried fruits type of deal. This is definitely, for me, you get some of that oakiness up front, but then it's got like a really sweet cherry note to it that I love in bourbon.
And I think a lot of that I'd attribute to the French oak, actually. So I guess backing up, Triple Oak refers to the fact that we finish it in 3 different oak varieties. So I think the name kind of suggests that it's going to be this huge oaky beast, and really it's more about showing the subtleties of each of those oak varieties and how we balance them with each other. So back to saying it's the same base bourbon. Typically, we're dumping about 100, 120 5-year-old bourbon barrels, and 9 days out of 10, empty port wine barrels show up. We get about 150 of those from Portugal every month. But on the days we're doing triple oak, really the only difference is those 3 oak varieties show up. So we have, as opposed to other brands that'll deconstruct the barrel, put different staves in. Not saying that's the wrong way, but or right way. We just wanted to do it in a different way to us. And so the barrels are either entirely made of French oak, entirely made of Hungarian oak, or entirely made of a variety called Chinkapin, which is local to our area. And for me, despite the title of distiller, I more or less consider myself a blender today with the company. It's about basically taking those 3 spirits as they exit those barrels and then finding a balance between the 3 of them, batch to batch to batch, and making sure that they all, have consistency to it.
Yeah, and then, love to get your notes, but for me, on the palate, that cherry shines through again. I really love that. That's like one of my favorite notes in bourbon is when that shows up.
Yeah, and so I think, each variety, right, we can go through real quick. The French oak is, there's plenty of other French oak whiskeys out there. People say baking spices, cinnamon, nutmeg. I think the chewiness and like the finish of it, I'd attribute to that as well. Whereas the other 2 varieties, I think, bring in some degree of fruitiness as well. So Hungarian almost has this tart quality. Tart or like astringency usually is a bad word.
Right.
But for me, there's always this attribute I'm trying to work towards in a whiskey, which I would describe as almost like juicy, right? What makes you salivate? What makes you want to take a second sip? With a wine barrel, it's very easy to get that. There's a degree of acidity to any wine, right?
Yep.
But with just oak varieties, a little bit harder to hit, and the Hungarian provides that. So it's more of that bright, tart, juicy character, and then the Chinkapin has more of the classic American notes, caramel, vanilla, and all those.
And then can you talk a little bit about what in different oak varietals changes the the flavor profiles? Is it the tightness of the grain, or to just dive in a little bit? Yeah, what does that look like?
Oh man, we could do an hour on this alone. But so yeah, just the structure of the oak. Vanillin, as you might imagine, the vanilla notes are much higher in American oak. French oak, yeah, they say tightness of the grain, that sort of thing. There's a compound called lignin that when you toast it or char it, that's what breaks down and then gives you the kind of like almonds and those sort of flavors as well. So yeah, not a quick subject to cover.
Right. We could go way more into
but yeah, long story short, each one kind of brings similar profiles to the table. And my job across all the whiskeys we're working with is to sort of layer these different flavors on, which is what finishing is kind of at the base of the whole concept.
That's awesome. Well, and then on to the next one. So this is your guys' Bottled in Bond. You can just This is a new release from you guys.
Yes.
This came out just a few months ago, right?
Yeah, nationally. So we had launched it about, a year and a half ago as a distillery-only release, which I think is a fun way to do it, right? Like when we want to do something a little bit more experimental, and I know you were at the distillery not too long ago.
Yes.
Like that not only allows us to satisfy the ask of what can I buy here I can't buy anywhere else for somebody who's going to come in from out of town, but also for me it gives me a very easy playground to debut new ideas, right? Maybe it doesn't take off, maybe it's more specific and we want to put it somewhere else, but in this case, we pretty much got unanimously positive feedback, so then we scaled up to a national release I think a couple months ago, hit shelves. So I mean, I guess forget everything I just said about finishing and being a cast finish company. This is our first ever unfinished bourbon. So as a bottle and bond,
right?
Legally, right? One distillery, one distilling season. But importantly, no added color or flavor, which is essentially what cast finishing is doing. And so 15 years in, right, I'll bring it back to what we were saying off the bat. If we were founded on cast finishing, which was kind of a radical notion at the time, but now that's gained common acceptance, it felt like the right time to almost go against our own grain and come out with an unfinished bourbon.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't think about how being bottled in bond would preclude you from cast finishing.
Well, I say that now. And in the last year, I've seen the TTB approve multiple cast finish bottle and bond. So it's not even consistent. But even if I had thought I had the means of doing a cast finish bottle and bond, I don't think I would have. Because for me, it was the way for us to do an unfinished one and the story that I wanted to tell around that.
Makes sense.
So, but what is unique about this, right? So important because it was our first ever distillery only release. Very important because it was our first ever unfinished bourbon. But I think the coolest and most unique part of it is the first time that I'm aware that a bottle and bond's ever been done at cask strength. So we blended to hit exactly 100 proof without adding any water to it.
Wow.
And so still, even if we were going to do an unfinished bourbon, we wanted to do it in a way that had uniqueness and was kind of pushing the category forward.
Yeah.
So the way I argued that was like, look, if back to our original ones, right? If we were taking cast finishing of the style of European whiskey and applying it to bourbon, or the bourbon category, it was the idea of marrying concepts across the whiskey industry. And for me, what I repitched the Bottle & Bond was like, look, we're not a cast finish company. Like that's going to be our flagship, and that's what we're about. But like on the walls of the distillery, it says "Revere tradition, embrace progress." And to me, that's the idea of marrying these concepts across category. And so for this, it was like, look, Bottle & Bond's from 1897 as a set of regulations. Cast strength, not exactly a new concept, but I would say probably close to peak popularity. Certainly with COVID times and everything else coming out of that. So it's the idea of looking within category, looking within bourbon, still marrying concepts in a way that has never been done before.
Yeah.
And to me, that felt like a very Angel's Envy way to release an unfinished bourbon.
Oh yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, on the palate, it's delicious. I mean, super like, definitely more in a more obviously traditional bourbon style, right?
Yep.
Your caramels, vanillas shine through,
Yep.
but it's got like almost like a viscous, syrupy orange thing going on.
Which to me, you nailed it, viscosity. So for, so often we are bourbon nerds, but we're also selling whiskey or making whiskey for bourbon nerds. And people want, as high a proof as they can get it, single barrel, straight out of the barrel. Oftentimes that's now manifesting itself in hazmat or 130 proof, whatever. When I'm making whiskey, I'm also trying to think of, look, I want to make the bourbon nerd happy, but I also want to do something that I can pour for my mom at Christmas.
Yep.
I'm not going to pour my mom a hazmat whiskey because that's not going to go well. But what's cool about this is that I can show people what a cast strength experience is, right? That viscosity, the coating of your whole palate,
Right.
but I can do it at 100 proof. So really it's a way to kind of open the door up to people that maybe haven't reached that point of their bourbon journey.
Right.
So to speak.
No, that makes sense. So you're saying that that viscosity comes from it not being proofed down,
100%.
even though it's at 100 proof.
And if we want to dive into it, right? So the way we were able to execute this primarily was a lower barrel entry proof. So we did 103 entry proof rather than just right at 125, which is what we do 99.9% of the time. And so that allowed us to then put it in parts of the warehouse where it crept down in proof and then blend to hit that 100.
Okay.
But when you add more water into the barrel off the still, you create a very different whiskey. So back to kind of your question on the different oak varieties and the compounds there.
Right.
So that's one part of the equation specific to triple oak. But your barrel entry proof, water and alcohol both pull different compounds out of your barrel. So even with the same type of barrel, if you toggle that variable, you can create a completely different whiskey. And so general rule of thumb is the higher the proof in the barrel, the more tannin, the more color, the more oak, and potentially astringency you pull out.
Right.
The lower entry proof, maybe hard to tell on this, but the color is much lighter for an almost 6-year-old bourbon.
Yep.
And so the lower entry proof, the lighter, the less oak, the less tannin, and the more rounded sweet profile you produce. So even though, again, this is a very nerdy whiskey, and it goes back to what I was saying, I'm trying to make a whiskey for the bourbon nerd,
Right.
but at the end of the day, if it doesn't taste good, then I didn't do my job.
Right.
And so I think this is a very approachable whiskey as well because it's so soft and sweet at 100 proof because of the low entry proof.
That's awesome. That's super cool. I didn't realize all that. And then moving on to the next one, we have Angel's Envy Rye.
Yep.
So this is, your guys' kind of flagship rye.
Yep.
Been on the shelves for forever. I like this one a lot. This is one of actually like the first ryes I ever drank.
Yeah, we get that a
way
lot.
back in the day.
It's kind of like the gateway whiskey for a lot of people, or gateway rye for a lot of people. I think if you look at it as far as our core lineup now, right, our flagship, our triple oak, and our finished rye, I like it, and it makes the triple oak make a lot of sense as well for where it's slotted in, both in a price point and profile, right? So we have 43.3% on the flagship, we have 92 proof on the triple oak, and we have 100 proof on the rye. So each of those kind of has increasing proof, and then from a whiskey making standpoint, as you increase in proof, we want to increase kind of in the intensity of the finishing casks. So whereas the flagship is fairly light on the port profile, we do that because we fill our port barrels multiple times.
Yep.
Each time we fill it, we get less and less port flavor out of it. So actually, that's mostly built on second and third fill port barrels. Separate conversation. But then the triple oak, I would say, is more of a balanced, complex finish. And then the rye at 100 proof, and the oldest base whiskey of the three, has the most heavy finish, right? And that sweet molasses flavor does give it a pretty good degree of approachability and an ability to kind of bring people into the fold. I do think it's fun to pull these side by side. I mean, we'll talk about this one in a second, but I think it just goes to show the different thought process behind how you finish a whiskey. So whereas these two I would call almost complementary finishes, just like we were talking about earlier, there's a degree of fruitiness, there's a degree of spiciness to the base bourbon, and those two pull them in their different directions. This rye is what I'd call a contrasting finish, right? The base rye is spicier, has a little bit more kick to it. So what do you do? Rather than accentuate that, you play it against itself and you play it into a fruitier, sweeter finishing cask.
And it is so interesting. I mean, the flavor profile I've got on this, I mean, you do get a little bit of that rye spice up front, and on the nose, actually, more than the palate, I get a little bit of that, just a tiny bit of the dilly earthiness.
Sure.
It doesn't shine through as much on the palate, but the palate is, I mean, maple syrup on pancakes, right? I mean, you get a little bit of the, like weedy, yeasty thing that would remind me of pancakes, and then the maple just shines. Like, it is big, bold, mapley. It's awesome. I love it.
And just thinking, I think going back to this real quick, the bottle and bond was cool for us to get out for the exact reasons I was just talking about. The one way I pitched it is like, look, triple oak, we released that as a way to showcase what finishing does to the bourbon and pull it in a different direction. Getting an unfinished bourbon out actually gives us more tools to educate on finishing. Because when you taste this, you can taste the spiciness or the fruitiness that's in there. And so, same idea as what we just talked about with the rye. That has a breadiness, an herbal character, but and it's not lost, but it's just again contrasting the best way I can put it.
Right.
Which is fun to then talk about this one, the tequila finish rye, because that is going back into the complementary finish.
Okay.
Right? That herbal, that herbaceous, that spice of the rye, those tequila barrels, we've already done the contrasting one with the rum.
Right.
And so
let's jump into that one.
And so basically the tequila was just set to accentuate that.
Yeah.
And again, same idea as the triple oak, not wanting to make it taste exactly the same as the flagship, because that would be beside the point.
Why do you do it? Yep.
We'll do special versions of we'll show you other things that we have to do with rye and rum casks, but with our cellar release series specifically, we wanted to showcase just kind of a little bit more outside the box finishing.
Yeah.
And going back to my background, so I go from craft beer to Scotch whiskey, and then spent about 7 years in Colorado, which is where I first met you and the team. At a distillery called Stranahan's, and our parent company was Jose Cuervo, essentially. So I had done a lot of R&D around tequila barrels, and now that I have Patron as a sister company, that's what allowed me to really hit the ground running on this release. So this is the second thing I ever put down with the company.
And kind of fun story with this one. When we were in Louisville this year, we happened to be there on the day you guys were releasing this at the distillery. And this team at Southern was good enough to hook us up. I was like, head down to Angel's Envy. You guys got to see this. And we got to try it for the first time. I've had probably, 2 or 3 tequila finished whiskeys in my life. I don't know if I've had another tequila finished rye. And this stuff was awesome. And thank you guys again for having us for that. But I'm super excited to dig back into this one. So you guys gave us some samples, and Justin was giving me a hard time right before we went live that I may have finished them after the event, immediately after the event, before going to bed, because they were that good.
Well, we can find some more. I don't know if you've seen my office, but it's pretty much very similar to I think what your storage area probably looks like. But again, I'll just go back to saying that like layering idea. So with this one, I actually phoned up my counterpart at Patron. Again, having done some R&D base work with tequila to know that I wanted to work with that, and basically just said, hey, what's cool that you're working on? Like what are you passionate about that's coming out in the next year for you? And then ultimately, like, can I have them was going to be the ask. And so I didn't really know the extended Patron portfolio at the time, but these were Patron Piedra barrels. So it's French oak, back to the kind of the triple oak discussion. And then Extra Añejo, I think it's around 4 years aged in the tequila. So in that, back to the layering conversation, I was like, okay, French oak baking spices, just what we're saying. And then we got the tequila kind of aged añejo, more the grassy flavor. So I was like, I'm not going to fill these barrels with bourbon. I'm going to fill them with rye. Because not only do I have the rye spice profile, but I already, just in a singular finishing cask, I already kind of have 2 different spice profiles that I'm working with. So spice into spice into spice, and that's what you have in the bottle.
That's awesome. Now. Yeah, take us through what you get on this one.
So this one, I think
there's a lot going on.
Even though I just said spice into spice into spice, I think the spice is what allowed the flavors to all tie together really nicely, but it's not an overly spicy release. I actually think it has a good degree of sweetness to it. I think there's a big honey note to it, or like, if I'm really kind of leaning into the tequila, like an agave nectar kind of flavor to it. And the tequila really presents itself on the finish I think you're left, I mean, just like you said with
Yep.
this one, I think you have some herbal, almost dilly notes to it on the front end, and it's very recognizable as a rye,
Right.
but that tequila just softens the whole thing, and then you're left with that honey on the finish.
And I think some people might be afraid. They'd be like, "What, tequila and bourbon? Like that doesn't seem like it mixes, right?" And it's not. It's not like the agave bite that you're getting through in this. It's the cooked agave. It's
Yes.
the
Yeah, yeah.
sweetness
The
from the piña.
The Tahona if you've been
Exactly.
down there.
Yep.
Yes, so like that caramelized flavor. Yes,
Yep.
caramelized agave, exactly that. Yeah, and I think this is a good example as well of just the type of whiskey that I want to make where it's, we can do big, bold finishes when we want to, but this one, again, kind of with the idea that, look, rye's punchy, tequila's punchy. A lot of people, I think, might think about it in like a shooting sense, and it's like, no, not all.
No.
It's high-end versions of both,
Yep.
and then showing that intersectionality between the two flavor profiles. And then what we did with this is we finished it for almost a year and a half. So
Wow.
there's an analogy I always use, and my brand team's going to roll their eyes at me, but I've been trying to find a fancier one, but to me the best analogy to finishing or blending whiskey is like making chili. It's always going to be better on the second day or third day, and I treat finishing the exact same. If I can give a really long finish, that's what's going to allow those flavors to sync together really nicely, and that's what the cooked agave and then the caramels and vanillas of the American oak barrel, and just allowing those flavors to really, like, I guess in a sense, like, it's not about, with triple oak you can talk about, oh, I'm picking out this oak variety or that oak variety, and with the tequila finish you say, oh, I can get the cooked agave or whatever, but at the end of the day, I think if I've really done my job right, it's less about picking out the flavors and where they came from, and more about the idea that we matched it so well that what you're tasting is 2024 Angels Envy Cellar Collection or something like that.
No, that's awesome. And then, like we said, everything today on the table is 15% off. This guy, we have one in the case. It's a super special one. And then, just kind of as a closing deal, since it is so cold out today, the snow, one of my favorite things to do on a cold winter day is make a hot toddy. So we are going to do that with the flagship here. So we've got our nice Angels Envy jigger. We like here at Whiskey Wednesday a nice heavy pour. So, use the big side of the jigger, boom, and keep going. Oops, even as you spill a little bit, that's all right. And then a nice squeeze of lemon. Just squeeze one of those right into the cocktail. It's half a lemon. And I like to even just leave it in there. It'll get a little lemony as we go. And then for me, I do things a little differently with the hot toddy. I use agave nectar as opposed to honey.
Back to it.
Right?
Yeah.
Back
we should
to
make it with this one.
Right? We probably should have.
Let's try another one after
Yeah,
this.
after this. So just a little squeeze of that on top. And then what's going to help kind of mix the agave in or the honey in is, nice and hot water. So we got this boiling a little bit before we jumped on live here. Just fill that to the top. And then we also have our nice Angels Envy stir. Give that a good stir, and the heat and the water should help kind of mix the agave in nicely, and then, that's the perfect drink for a winter day. So, perfect. Owen, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
This has been super informative. I mean, super cool to see kind of all the cool new directions you guys are going.
The first video we ever did together was during COVID.
Yes, yep.
And so it's a fun full circle moment for me, not only to be back in Denver while it's snowing, it feels very appropriate, but to be able to do a video with you in person is a great way to kick the visit off. So.
Well, cheers, man. Appreciate you. Like we said, guys, anniversary sale ends today. Come on down, give all of these a shot. Cheers.